Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics, Y&R spoilers. Young and the Restless. Spoilers, Audra's latest gambit, pregnancy, power, and the limits of Nate's trust. The relationship between Audra and Nate has always leaned on ambition as much as attraction, but it now stands on a knife's edge. The spark that once made them dangerous together has cooled into something more brittle. Two strategists weighing risks, outcomes, and reputations. Into that tension drops Audra's most consequential move yet, a pregnancy claim that could either recalibrate the couple's future or expose her most damaging lie. Whether the baby is real or a calculated bluff, the mere possibility forces everyone in Genoa City's power grid. Nate, Clare, Kyle, and Victor to reconsider their positions and prepare for collateral damage. The immediate fracture begins with money and pride. Nate has started to see past Audra's polished explanations about Bronte's lost funding and her abrupt break with Victor. For weeks, she framed the severed alliance as her own decision, a principled pivot away from a volatile backer who no longer fit her vision, but the timeline never truly added up. Audra had courted that support, touted it, and made it central to Bronte's rollout. Walking away just as the checks were supposed to clear was never in her character. When Nate presses, the veneer cracks. On the August 18th episode, Audra refuses to give him the full story and meets probing questions with a defensive edge. To an executive like Nate, trained to hear what isn't said, silence is loud and deflection is damning. He realizes he doesn't have all the information. More importantly, he realizes Audra wants it that way. Enter Clare with her own agenda and an armful of secrets. Clare has learned that Audra had been working quietly and pointedly on Victor's behalf to sabotage Clare and Kyle's future. The scheme was simple in concept and ruthless in execution. Undermine the Clare-Kyle partnership until it collapses under manufactured strain, then realign assets and influence to serve Victor's ends. But the operation faltered. Instead of splitting the pair, Audra overplayed her hand, and the strategic breakup never landed. The failure was not abstract, it came with consequences. Victor didn't merely step back, he cut her off. The money spigot that Audra had promised to the Bronte dried up, and the public story had to become something else. Anything other than the truth that she was expelled from the inner circle for missing her mark. Clare's decision to tell Nate is not charitable transparency, it's targeted correction. She knows how Audra operates, how half-truths metastasize into narratives and how those narratives can destroy careers and relationships. So, she prepares to hit Nate with curveballs, not slander, but facts delivered at the exact pressure point. She intends to walk him through the real chain of events, who initiated the sabotage order, how Audra executed it, where it failed, and why the funding vanished. She even plans to highlight a gesture that looked romantic to the room but strategic to anyone who understands Audra, her public possessive kiss with Nate. What the crowd saw as passion, Clare frames as a claim staked in the most visible way possible, a message to rivals and allies alike. Nate is mine, stand down. To Clare, that kiss wasn't love. It was theater. A glossy seal over a crumbling story. If Audra is pregnant, everything changes. And also, nothing does. On one level, a child introduces permanence. It binds to people through decisions, finances, and schedules that outlast corporate seasons and venture cycles. It complicates breakups, tempers ultimatums, and recalibrates stakes. On another level, a pregnancy does not erase motive. Nate will still have to assess whether he's tethering himself to a partner whose default mode is manipulation. He will have to decide if he can co-parent with someone who withholds crucial facts when they are inconvenient. The question is not merely is the baby real, but what happens when the next crisis arrives? Will I be the last to know again? If the pregnancy is genuine, Nate's response must be measured, protective, and anchored in verification rather than panic. If the pregnancy is a bluff, designed to freeze him in place long enough for Audra to rebuild leverage, then confronting it becomes an integrity test he cannot afford to fail. For Nate, the corporate context matters as much as the personal. He has a history of letting ambition warp judgment and paying dearly for it. The lesson is still fresh. Nothing ruins a promising run like a preventable scandal. Here he faces a cascade of reputational risks. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. If he ignores the Victor-Audra sabotage nexus, he looks naive. If he exposes it too aggressively, he looks disloyal to the woman he may soon have a child with. The narrow path is due diligence, private verification of Clare's claims, a dispassionate review of Ronti's funding trail, a closed-door conversation with Victor to confirm the termination terms, and a timeline analysis that aligns the failed breakup gambit with the withdrawal of support. Each step gives Nate cover, documented, rational, defensible, so that when he takes a position, it is grounded in facts, not gossip or impulse. Audra, meanwhile, is running out of room to maneuver. The moment Claire speaks to Nate, the clock starts. Audra can cling to the curated narrative. I chose independence. Victor no longer fits my vision. Funding will be replaced. Or she can pivot to honesty and attempt a reset. The latter is riskier in the moment, but safer long-term. If she is truly pregnant, transparency protects her and the baby by lowering volatility and rebuilding a baseline of trust. It also positions her to reframe the sabotage assignment as a mistake made under pressure rather than evidence of incurable malice. But that strategy requires what Audra has avoided since the beginning, admitting that the plan to fracture Clare and Kyle was real, that she attempted it, and that it backfired. The alternative, doubling down on partial truths while brandishing a pregnancy as a shield, may win a few days of calm at the cost of the months of chaos that always follow exposure. Victor's role is clinical and consequential. He does not need to destroy Audra to win. He only needs to make her irrelevant. Petting funding already sent that message. If pressed, he can corroborate Claire's version with a few choice facts, keeping his fingerprints minimal while nudging Nate toward clarity. From Victor's vantage, there is no benefit to being dragged into a domestic dispute unless the dispute threatens a division he cares about. If Audra tries to rehabilitate herself by invoking his name as a villain, he will simply adjust the board again. In Genoa City, power rarely shouts. It edits. Claire's motives deserve scrutiny as well. Truth can coexist with strategy. She wants mate out of Audrey's orbit because a settled, focused mate is less likely to be weaponized against her and Kyle. Exposing Audrey's assignment protects her relationship and preempts new divides. Yet, there's an ethical line Claire must mind. Inform. Don't incite. If she tips into taunting or public humiliation, she risks making Nate defensive and driving him back toward the very person she aims to separate him from. The smartest version of Claire is the one who treats this like a governance fix. Supply the facts quietly, then step away and let the affected parties solve their problem. Where does Kyle fit? As the unintentional target of the failed breakup, Ploy, he is both witness and cautionary tale. If Nate chooses to ignore what Audra did to Clare and Kyle, he tacitly accepts that similar tactics could one day be used on him, and Kyle's presence also underlines a more uncomfortable truth. Audra's strongest feelings are often about momentum, not people. When a relationship advances her position, she invests. When it stalls or threatens exposure, she pivots. A baby, real or alleged, tests whether she is ready to live differently or simply adept at finding new anchors. Practically, the next moves are clear. Nate should ask for time and privacy, then verify. If Audra says she is pregnant, he can request medical confirmation without accusation. An ultrasound appointment, a physician's note, a timeline that matches their intimacy. If she is offended by the request, that reaction is data. If she complies, that cooperation is also data. In parallel, Nate should audit the Babranti pipeline and memorialize what he learns. Meeting notes, dates of funding decisions, any communications that indicate external pressure tied to the Clare K situation. The goal is not prosecution, it's protection. If the relationship survives, they will need a factual baseline to rebuild trust. If it doesn't, he will need to exit cleanly without a public relations war that stains both of them. For Audra, the best defense now is restraint. Stop performing strength and start practicing it. Put the theater aside, the public territory marking kiss, the curated indignation, the dramatic refusals to answer, and pick candor. Tell Nate exactly what happened with Victor, what she was asked to do to Clare and Kyle, how she failed, and why she lied about it. Then set terms for moving forward that do not hinge on leverage, but on boundaries, what she will and will not do for money, what she expects in return, and how the two of them will handle disputes before they metastasize into scandals. If there is a child, that conversation becomes non-negotiable. If there isn't, and this was a bluff, it's the end. Not only of the relationship, but of any credible claim Audra has to leadership in Genoa City's executive class. There are many sins the town forgives. Fabricating a baby to trap a partner is not among them. In the end, the story isn't really about whether Audra is pregnant. It's about whether truth can coexist with ambition in a relationship built on maneuvering. Clare's revelations will land because they are specific and verifiable, not because they come from a rival. Victor's quiet edits will hold because they reflect outcomes already in motion. Kay will watch closely, less out of spite than self-preservation, and Nate, the one person who still has something to lose on every side, will have to choose what kind of partner, executive, and man he intends to be. If he demands clarity and receives it, there is a narrow path back to trust, albeit with new rules and fewer illusions. If he meets half-truths with indulgence, he will discover what every power player eventually learns. The cost of ignoring small lies is paying for larger ones later with interest. So, the board is set. A pregnancy claim, promises, stakes, sympathy, and time, but only for those who deserve them. The coming days will reveal whether Audra wants redemption or just another angle, whether Nate values peace over proximity, and whether Genoa City will remember this as the moment two smart people grew up, or as the final inevitable unraveling of a partnership that mistook chemistry for character. By the time the week of August 18th to 22nd closes, there are no more easy detours left for Audra. Every polished dancer she has spent months rehearsing has run headlong into Nate's insistence on facts, sequence, and motive. The great advantage of dating a strategist is that he understands pressure and discretion. The disadvantage is that he also recognizes when the numbers don't add up. Nate's patience, once a moat around the relationship, is now a clock, and it's almost out of time. He wants the truth from Audra herself, not curated through rival whispers or sanitized by PR. That demand forces Audra to choose between the two currencies she has relied on since the first day she arrived in Genoa City. Performance and confession. Only one of them will buy her another chapter here. The immediate conflict does not erupt out of nowhere. It accumulates through small evasions that hardened into a wall. Nate knows the outlines. The vanished funding for Vronti. The implausible claim that walking away from Victor was Audra Unk's idea. The public gestures like the sudden territorial kiss designed to look like romance and signal ownership in the same breath. He has learned that when Audra is winning, she narrates. When she is cornered, she edits. On August 18th, the editing stops working. Pressed to recount what really happened and why money evaporated at the exact pace that her attempt to fracture Clare and Kyle failed, Audra runs out of angles. She can keep dodging and guarantee a break, or she can finally speak plainly and risk one. Anyway, honesty when it comes is not clean. It never is with high achievers who prize control. Audrey can admit the broad strokes that she carried out a covert assignment to undermine Clare and Kyle's future. That the breakup ploy did not land. That Victor cut the pipeline as a consequence without letting go of the story she tells herself. She did it to protect her company, her trajectory, and in a twisted way, her life with Nate. The confession, therefore, sits in a contradictory space, part revelation and part plea. Yes, I crossed the line. No, I'm not the villain you think, and if you see the pressure I was under, perhaps you'll forgive me for cutting corners that were never supposed to be visible. But Nate's anger is not theatrical. It is the collected bill for months of partial truths, and it reads like a spreadsheet. This decision led to this exposure. This exposure led to this loss. This loss bled into us until our private life felt like an extension of your next move. At that point, a familiar Genoa City play intrudes. If truth cannot heal a breach, perhaps a baby can. The possibility that Audra is pregnant, either conceived just before she left Nice, or during a heated reunion when she returned to help Nate dull the grief of losing Damien, introduces the most consequential variable yet. Announced early, it becomes a plea for patience and a promise of permanence. Announced later, it becomes a twist of fate, a reason to revisit decisions made in anger. The fact that the timing plausibly supports either scenario is exactly what makes the claim combustible. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Nate knows biology. He also knows leverage. To protect himself and any potential child, he must separate those two things ruthlessly. If the pregnancy is real, clarity should be easy. A doctor's appointment, a due date that aligns with the window Audra specifies. The kind of medical documentation that turns speculation into care planning. Under that path, the conversation changes from indictment to logistics. Prenatal appointments, living arrangements, the speed and scope of any attempt at reconciliation. It doesn't erase the sabotage plot or the lies that covered it, but it the pacing. Instead of a final break issued in the heat of discovery, the pair could negotiate a provisional truce with strict boundaries, transparent calendars, audited finances around Veronti, no more covert assignments on anyone's behalf, and an agreement that any third-party interference. Victor's quiet nudges, Claire's vigilant warnings, Kyle's warranted skepticism will be handled in daylight rather than triangulated in shadows. Nate, burned before by ambition, would insist on governance guardrails. Audra, if she truly wants to reset, would accept them not as punishment, but as scaffolding. If the pregnancy is not real, the calculus becomes simple and brutal. Fabricating a child to freeze a partner's exit is a point of no return in a town that forgives almost anything except the exploitation of family to win a boardroom war. Audra would then be moving from strategist to saboteur of the one arena that still confers grace in Genoa City. Parenthood, and the lie would not confine itself to the relationship. It would spill outward, warping alliances, inviting victors, contempt, and confirming to Clare and Kyle that every alarm they raised about Audrey Yuanqi's methods was not only valid but understated. Even a later recant, "I panicked, I blurted it out," would not function as repair. It would read as proof that when cornered, Audra will reach for the sharpest tool available regardless of who bleeds. The dangerous truth is that both stories, genuine, pregnancy and strategic bluff, fit Audra's profile in different seasons of her life. The version of Audra who bet her future on Veronti and tried to take apart Clare and Kyle could see a baby as a stabilizer, a reason to slow down the churn and build something durable. The version of Audra who reflexively turns problems into optics could see the same announcement as a shock tactic to reset the board on her terms. Which version stands in front of Nate at week's end depends not on what she says but on what she is willing to show. If she leads with appointments and doctors rather than theatrics and demands, Nate will see a partner trying to grow. If she leads with outrage at being asked for proof, he will see a tactician buying time. Meanwhile, the surrounding players do not hibernate while the couple negotiates their future. Victor's editing remains relentless and quiet. He doesn't need revenge, only distance. If asked, he can confirm the funding cutoff and the reasons without stepping into scandal. Clare occupies the opposite posture, transparent, active, and unashamed to admit motive. She wants Nate awake to what Audrey did, because a clear-eyed Nate is less likely to be weaponized. Kyle, the collateral target, becomes a living case study. If Audrey could engineer pressure on him to topple Clare, what stops her from orchestrating a similar campaign against anyone who blocks her next deal? Those impressions harden fast in Genoa City, and they matter even if Nate and Audra somehow manufacture a truce. To avoid making a permanent enemy of everyone at once, Audra needs a plan built on restraint rather than spectacle. First, no more public performances to claim Nate. They read as stagecraft and insult his intelligence. Second, everything about the pregnancy, if it is real, must be anchored to care, not politics. That means involving Nate immediately and without conditions, looping him into medical information from the start, and inviting a neutral third party, perhaps a physician recommended by someone outside both of their camps to keep the process free of the suspicions that have already poisoned so much. Third, she must stop pretending that the sabotage plot was anything other than a breach, acknowledging it fully, apologizing without qualifiers, and making specific amends publicly if needed, would do more than any dramatic promise to change. Precision is the only language this audience respects. Nate's counterpart plan is even simpler. Because simplicity is the only way to avoid being pulled under by the emotional tide, he should ask for 48 hours of quiet to verify timelines and claims. He should document what he learns, and he should decide on a course of action that he can defend to himself if no one else. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Either a structured reconciliation centered on the child and governed by rules that preempt the next crisis, or a clean break that moves the relationship from romance to cooperative co-parenting, if a baby is indeed on the way. If there is no baby, the decision makes itself. The breakup becomes not an act of anger, but an act of hygiene. Audra can still choose which story she will inhabit. Redemption, grounded in proof and repair, or one last gambit that will erase any remaining sympathy. Nate, for his part, can choose whether this becomes the week he lost his temper or the week he found his spine. And the audience, for once, does not need to guess what truth looks like. It will be visible in the paperwork, the appointments, and the silence that follows when the performance stops. The video offers an in-depth analysis of the latest storyline in The Young and the Restless, focusing on the complex relationship between Audra and Nate. Their partnership, once fueled by ambition and attraction, is now fraught with mistrust, manipulation, and fragile power dynamics. Audra's claimed pregnancy, whether genuine or a strategic bluff, becomes the pivotal factor threatening to redefine their future. The narrative explores how Audra's covert sabotage of Clare and Kyle's relationship, backed by Victor's funding, backfires disastrously, leading to financial and reputational fallout. Clare, armed with insider knowledge, confronts Nate to reveal Audra's duplicity, forcing him to navigate a labyrinth of half-truths, alliances, and power plays. Nate faces a critical test of judgment to verify the pregnancy claim and assess whether Audra can be trusted as a partner and co-parent, or whether she is using the pregnancy as leverage to manipulate him further. Victor's quiet maneuvers to render Audra irrelevant add another layer of intrigue. While Clare's motives mix transparency with strategic self-preservation, Kyle, caught in the crossfire, serves as a cautionary figure, highlighting Audra's tendency to prioritize momentum over genuine relationships. The video stresses that Nate's response must be measured and grounded in facts, medical verification of the pregnancy, and an audit of Ronti's funding to navigate the situation wisely. For Audra, the path forward demands honesty, restraint, and acceptance of accountability for her failed sabotage. The pregnancy, if real, could offer a chance for rebuilding trust under new boundaries. If a bluff, it spells the end of her credibility and leadership in Genoa City. Ultimately, the story centers on whether truth and ambition can coexist in a relationship built on power and strategy. With Nate's decisions shaping not only his personal life but his professional future, Audra's pregnancy claim becomes a game-changing factor in her fraught relationship with Nate. Audra's covert sabotage of Clare and Kyle backfires, leading to loss of Victor's funding and trust. Clare reveals Audra's duplicity to Nate with strategic precision, aiming to protect her own interests. Nate is caught between personal loyalty and professional integrity, forced to verify facts before acting. Victor's quiet, clinical moves seek to sideline Audra without overt confrontation. The pregnancy, real or fake, tests whether Audra is ready to grow or just manipulating for leverage. Nate's insistence on verification and transparency sets the stage for a possible reset or final breakup. Pregnancy as power and vulnerability. Audra's pregnancy claims symbolizes both a potential stabilizing force and a manipulative tool. It introduces permanence and complexity into their relationship, forcing Nate to reconsider his priorities. If genuine, it could anchor Audra's ambitions to a new reality of shared responsibility. If fabricated, it exposes a ruthless willingness to exploit the most sacred bonds for personal gain, eroding trust irreparably. The thin line between strategy and manipulation. Audra's character embodies the tension between calculated ambition and ethical boundaries. Her sabotage attempt against Clare and Kyle reveals a strategic mindset willing to weaponize personal relationships for corporate advantage. This blurring of public and private spheres challenges the sustainability of any partnership based on mutual respect. Nate's role as arbiter of truth. Nate's evolution from a willing participant in Audra's games to a discerning skeptic highlights the crucial role of due diligence in high-stakes relationships. His need for documented evidence and private verification reflects a mature approach to conflict resolution, emphasizing governance and transparency over impulse and emotion. Power dynamics and consequences in Genoa City. Victor's quiet withdrawal of funding and refusal to engage overtly underscores the subtle, editorial nature of power in this context. Instead of dramatic confrontations, control is exercised through influence, resource allocation, and strategic silence, shaping outcomes without inviting scandal upon himself. Clare's dual role as truth-teller and strategist. Clare's intervention is a calculated act of self-defense and political maneuvering. By exposing Audra's sabotage, she seeks to protect her own relationship and preempt future attacks. However, her approach must balance factual disclosure with restraint to avoid alienating Nate or escalating conflict unnecessarily. The importance of verification and boundaries. The narrative stresses that trust can only be rebuilt on a foundation of verified facts, clear communication, and agreed-upon boundaries. The call for medical proof of pregnancy and transparent financial audits represents a blueprint for how personal and corporate crises should be managed to prevent further damage. The cost of half-truths and performance. Audra's reliance on curated narratives, public gestures, and evasions has created a wall of mistrust. The story warns that small deceptions compound into larger betrayals. and only candid confession and accountability can halt the decay. The pregnancy claim forces a reckoning: will she choose confession or continued performance? Relationship as a reflection of leadership. The personal dynamics between Audra and Nate mirror their professional challenges. Ambition, trust, and integrity are as critical in their relationship as in Genoa City's corporate battles. Nate's decision will define not only their partnership's future but also his standing as a leader, who values truth over convenient illusions. Potential outcomes and stakes. The situation presents two stark paths: a cautious, fact-based reconciliation if the pregnancy is real, or a clean, principled break if it is a bluff. Either choice demands courage, clarity, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. The stakes extend beyond romance to reputation, power, and the possibility of co-parenting. The ethical dimension of power plays. The storyline highlights the ethical dilemmas faced by characters wielding influence. Audra's sabotage and potential pregnancy bluff raise questions about the limits of acceptable tactics in pursuit of ambition. The narrative challenges viewers to consider where ambition ends and moral compromise begins. Audience's role in witnessing truth. The video emphasizes that unlike many soap storylines shrouded in mystery, this arc will reveal truth through tangible evidence, medical documents, funding trails, and private conversations. This transparency invites the audience to engage critically rather than guess, enhancing the dramatic impact and realism. Time as a critical factor. Nate's patience is portrayed as a ticking clock, underscoring the urgency for resolution. The longer Audra delays honesty, the higher the stakes and the greater the risk of permanent damage to their relationship and reputations. The need for governance in personal and corporate affairs. The proposal of governance guardrails, rules, for transparency, dispute resolution, and third-party involvement reflects a modern approach to managing complex relationships. Where personal and business interests overlap, this pragmatic solution could serve as a model for conflict management in high-pressure environments. In summary, the video transcript provides a richly layered exploration of ambition, trust, and truth in the volatile world of the young and the restless. It reveals how personal relationships are deeply intertwined with power dynamics and corporate intrigue, and how the introduction of a pregnancy claim becomes a crucible testing the character's integrity and future. The story challenges all involved to choose between manipulation and honesty, performance and confession, with lasting consequences for their lives and legacies.